What are you doing?
I don't know. That about describes the kind of day it's been around here.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Oh, hey everybody!
Haney.
Yeah, everybody, welcome to the RealAg Radio after show, for that matter.
Right.
Oh, we just got off the air. It's a really quick turnaround because you got to move cords, unhook. It's like chaos. Maybe a bathroom break. Fill your coffee. There's a lot going on in that 2 minutes, and we're here. So it's
And
great. We're here. Joining me today is Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture, host of The Agronomist, participant in the RealAg Radio issues panel on Fridays. Yeah, just everything.
What don't I do? Let's be honest.
That's a good question.
Well, so you are allowed to go and fill your coffee before we do this, but it's 5:30 my time. So I am of that age that if I have coffee this late, I will be up till God knows when. So
then it becomes like a war of attrition against your mind.
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
so
man.
I'm just gonna stick with the fizzy water for right now. Also, I mean, as you mentioned, I host The Agronomist, but I host that at 8 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. So I apologize for the things happening with my light in this space. I'm not used to having daylight when I'm on this platform.
I had that issue. It was early on. We started doing The Agronomist, and it would have been fall, and the sun. I left the shade open because I look out in the studio here. I look out onto the street.
It was right in your eyes.
Well, it was started to change where half my face was like. So I had to wait for we played some clips, so we got a little bit better look. It was just not good. Not professional at all. Okay, Lindsay, you attended a technical briefing today from ECCC, Environment and Climate Change Canada. We're going to get to that in a second. We sort of hit on a little bit on the show, but before we go there, I have to ask you about this issue of environmental cross compliance. We heard from Deb Conlon. We heard from Tom Steve with Alberta Wheat and Barley Commissions, Deb Conlon with the GFO. We have a story up at realagriculture.com. They talked about it on RealAg Politics on Friday. We played those two clips today on the show. There is some concern here from farm groups that if we tie business risk management to, have a string attached to climate change goals, we're really, really crossing swords here. Do you think that there's any way to knock this off the track, or is this just a foregone conclusion that these strings are going to exist? What's your thoughts?
So I do really appreciate where this conversation has sort of got us, which is, look, this government wants to view everything through the climate lens, but it is, as you mentioned, it's sort of adding a whole bunch of facets to a program that's not, or a series of programs potentially, that really are not about climate goals at all. And so it does muddy the water. It makes already complicated situations perhaps far more complicated. So I'm glad we're having these conversations because I think it's important. And we know that that's how this government wants to do these things. However, I'm really concerned that it overcomplicates everything. And then we're going to get into sort of quite oppositional or perhaps even somewhat negative territory because it's going to be a pushback on this. So can we have the conversation where, okay, great, let's look at it through a climate lens in a way, but let's make sure that the actual pillars and the actual goals of these things actually get met? I'm not sure, but I mean, this isn't a rise per se,
Right.
although realistically, it's pretty short term as far as when we started having this conversation. I mean, I think the first time Ag Minister Bibeau sort of said it out loud was probably in February at the CFA AGM. So when we think about the timeline of how long we've been already talking about the new APF and starting to negotiate that and all those sorts of things. That's been happening for quite some time. We have to have a new APF to roll out for 2023. And so we're going to, this close to the sort of like rubber hits the road, we're going to start a whole new, by the way, tell me how these goals or tell me how these programs help my government meet these goals. Like, talk about changing the goalposts a little bit.
Very much so. I think it's a good way to put it. I like when Deb said that dog don't hunt. I love that saying. That's one of my favorites. I need to use that one. I need to use that one more. Okay, so there's a couple things on this, and one of I had a listener send me a message that, well, wait, before you get critical of this, they're doing the same thing in the U.S. And there's truth. There is some truth to that. Although I would say my perception would be in the attitude differences here. Canada
also dollars.
That is a whole other difference too. But there is in the U.S. it's more of a we can use the climate agenda to justify getting more money into agriculture.
Right.
Whereas here it's like, okay, if you want this money, you've got to hit this really high bar when it comes to climate change agenda.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yes, and that is a significant difference. It's not, here's a pot of money, here's our climate goals, here are the programs that this feeds, let's get her done. This is all right, you're not getting any more money, but now these programs need to do double duty in that if you want me to ask for more money, you're going to have to show me how they get us to those climate goals is really, I think, the message that probably far more eloquently will be said is that essentially if you want that envelope to be larger for these programs, you're going to have to show the federal government where it's going to help them meet their emissions targets.
You just said what I said on the show. I don't even think you were listening.
I didn't listen to the show, so no, I was not.
I think it's a horse trade.
As you'll note over this shoulder, I have a 4-year-old underfoot.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, hey, farm groups, you want the pot to get bigger? Cool. Well, we'll increase our 60%.
What are you going to give me?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where this all comes to hit. Okay, let's hit on the technical briefing today. I said on the radio show, I find all of this so confusing about the carbon offset market. It continues to sort of cramp my brain trying to stay up to speed. I can't imagine how the audience feels. They continue to be told that, the price on pollution will be an advantage for farmers. They keep on being told that there's a secondary income when it comes to the offset market. What did we learn today from ECCC?
Okay, so a few things. One, so what was announced today was essentially the first federal protocol that is essentially the first step in being able to get some money out of these credits. Okay, so yes, this is very complicated, and yes, this is going to be a lot to wrap our heads around. But in order to extract any value out of a carbon credit market, we have to have actual credits that can be traded. What was announced today was essentially for one sector, so that's landfills, the methane that is exhausted from landfills. There's now a protocol in place. So within the landfill industry, there is now a way that organizations, businesses, whatever, can create carbon offsets and actually trade them. To wrap our head around even further, there was a website that was launched today where you would register your project, you would get it verified, and it will be a public registry of carbon credits. But that is not the exchange. So just to muddy the water a little bit, the government is not hosting an exchange in any way, shape, or form. There are going to be third-party exchanges, brokers, even one-on-one deals that are going to exchange these credits. The government is just essentially going to launch the rules and regulations as to what constitutes a credit, and they're going to get registered so that there is some verifiable ways to say here's where they are, what, blah blah blah. But the actual price of them and who's going to buy and sell them, that's going to be done on some other exchange.
Okay.
So now, yeah, exactly. Okay. So now this is the first in a series of protocols. So landfills first.
Okay.
Next up is going to be refrigeration. So the refrigeration industry is going to get their protocol next. After that will be forest on private lands. Then we finally get to agriculture. It'll be livestock feed efficiency protocol. Then it'll be soil organic carbon protocol. So until we have a protocol, we can't have a project. So I'm using the royal we here.
Yeah.
So yeah, but if you're, say, a feedlot or a livestock producer or something like that, until we have the federal protocol, nothing you do on your farm or ranch is going to qualify as an offset, and you can't register your project. You can't do any of that till we have the protocol. Now that's to participate in the federally regulated offsets. There's open markets.
Yeah, and that does. We can still participate in the voluntary market, like the other, like, right? There's like
but they have to be different offsets. So you can't sell the same offset twice.
Okay.
So if let's say an individual company calls up a feedlot and says, let's work together, we have to get our emissions down. We can get them this far, but we need to buy, 50 more carbon ton equivalents. We want to buy them from you. And great, this is something they're doing to get to net zero, but not for federal regulation. So here's the rub, okay?
Yeah.
For federally regulated industries, their emissions caps are monitored. They have to show that they meet them. They have to pay for 25% of their emissions reduction, regardless. That's how the government gets money. 75% of their reductions, though, can come from either in-house reductions or by buying credits. So a company can go ahead for their own internal, we want to be net zero, they can go and buy credits from someone voluntarily, okay? That doesn't count towards, if they're a federally regulated industry, what those reductions are. So there will be, and there has been, and there will continue to be sort of voluntary, like we're doing this because it's the right thing to do when we want to use it in our PR. And then there will be we're doing this because we have to, because we create emissions and we have to offset them somehow. And they are going to be two different systems with two different offsets, and you can't double dip. So if you are a farmer or an organization or a landowner and you're going to be offering up these offsets, they can only be counted once. So you'll have to decide, do you want to sell it into the voluntary market or into the federally regulated market?
How are we going to administer all this?
Great question. With oodles and oodles and oodles of money, Shaun. That's the only thing I can figure out. This is, I think as I was sitting in on the briefing today, it just felt like a barge. Like it just felt like there was this huge, heavy, unwieldy piece of information that we're trying to navigate. And it's like in the Suez Canal. It's the boat with the and it's not going to work.
I'm sort of, I compare it to, like, you haven't seen Top Gun Maverick yet, have you?
No.
Yeah, so
to the surprise of very few.
Yeah. Well, when they're like doing the climb and they're like, there's the like 9 Gs on them, and like Tom Cruise's face is just like going
it does not move. I don't believe it moves. But anyway, carrying on.
It's all visual effects. You're right. In real life, it does not move.
In real life, it would not move. Yeah.
That's how this feels. Like I just feel like it's just really hard. And I'm not saying, I'm not being critical because I don't understand it enough to be critical. I'm just, it feels hard to get my head wrapped around how all this is going to end up being at the end of the day. Wow, this is really super successful, and we actually accomplished our goal of lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and we saved the planet.
So
let's have a parade.
I'm with you. I will say the longer that we cover this issue, and the longer that I sit in on these technical briefings and we try to make ECCC care about us, because it is it's a struggle sometimes to be like, guys, we really want to be part of your press conferences. Anyway, we're over here. We matter. Anyway, so I will say the longer that I do this, I'm starting to put some of these pieces together. But I am cognizant of the fact that this is part of my job and I have the luxury of the time of navigating through this. There are so many people who do not, who are going to be potentially part of this, who it's our job to wade through this barge of information and tease out what's really going to matter. So I did learn a few things today. I learned about that 75-25 split in that. So an emitter has to pay the government 25% of their emissions equivalent regardless. They that's how there has to be a payment made, but the rest can be essentially offset either through internal or through buying credits. So cool. So I learned that today. And there's a few other things that I'm starting to understand anyway about this, but ultimately it's very complicated and it is happening very quickly when you think about government. And that's actually a little bit frightening because this is so large and it is so complicated that it feels a little bit like all the money that got, thrown out through programs during COVID. I don't know if this is really as thought out as it probably should be. And so I don't know. We do know now what our goals are for 2030, 2050 with the methane reductions, those sorts of things. That's a little more open and transparent, but whoo doggy.
Okay, here's what I'm curious about, and I'm this is just me wondering. So if you might not know the answer to this, is there's been numerous examples as of late where I've heard we are the only country doing this. We are the only country doing it this way. We are the only country. And so I heard that from Dennis Laycraft from CCA when he was talking about the meat labeling today when we did the interview that's posted at Real Agriculture. We are the only country in the world doing this. Yep. We heard it on the fertilizer sanctions, the tariffs. We are the only G7 country that are making farmers pay a tariff on fertilizer coming into the country. It's a competitiveness issue. One thing that would concern me here is are we going about this similar to other competitive countries around the world? And if not, why are we setting ourselves up for being it's another roadblock to us being competitive in the global trade market? Who knows? But I wonder about that.
And so who knows? Yeah. So I don't have that answer. But one of the questions that did come up in the technical briefing was essentially, so does this dovetail into existing exchanges, like what California and Quebec have agreed to and all these sorts of things? And the answer was no. So so we are, we're reinventing the wheel. We're starting again. We're going to do it ourselves. So you're right. It's a pattern, at least for this government. So I mean, there is that. It's a pattern that, we seem to take. I don't know if you want to call it the moral high ground. I don't know if you want to call it, stubbornness. I'm not sure where it comes from. But as you mentioned, the frontal label packaging on ground beef and ground pork, I mean, we seem to be going alone on this. And so I don't understand why we would.
Hey, Bruce has a comment here. We are live, so you can comment. Bruce has a comment. Neighbor. Is he really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a country neighbor.
Okay.
So a country neighbor can be from very far away, but we are neighbors.
Yeah. Well, in Ottawa, in your area, is that like a mile? Because in the prairies, that could be like 10, 20, 25.
Oh, yeah. No, it's it's closer to the 10 mile. Anyway.
Okay. Well, Bruce. Anyway, Bruce sums this up. Bruce, I'm right there with you, buddy. Okay.
Me too.
Bruce says, how in the world would a commoner farmer, what is he talking about?
Come on, Bruce.
Such as himself, wade through this mess to not miss opportunities?
Yep.
It's insane. And this is, I can't highlight it on the screen here, but this is the part where I think Bruce makes a very good point. They're being told this is an opportunity. But in order to seize that opportunity, so we're headed towards, and I think Kelvin was the one that brought this up, we are not very far from having like an environmental consultant that you have to go to and say, here's what I'm doing, here's how I do it, figure this crap out for me.
So and very much that's realistically what we might end up with or will have to have, if only because, if we're going to participate in any way on the regulated market, you have to meet this protocol. You have to actually register your project. Like, there's a lot of admin that's going to go with it, and you have to understand it. The challenging part to all that, and to Bruce's point as well about missing opportunities, I mean, I gave you the list of what those protocols are and how long they're going to take. The agriculture ones are coming, but they're way down the list. Like, we could be talking years from now before there is one. So in the meantime, a farmer like Bruce or any farmer is sort of asking, well, what do I do? How do I do this? And so we are seeing, in the absence of, the regulated market coming online, we are seeing, of course, the voluntary market coming online. And this is where, there will likely be farmers who, and we'll find out if it was the right move eventually, but there will likely be farmers who jump on an opportunity and are doing the right things and are sequestering carbon, and they get paid for it. And maybe if they had waited 5 years, they would have got paid less, but in the last 5 years they got paid. So whatever. I honestly, Bruce, the best thing I can tell you is stay tuned to realagriculture.com.
I like that.
And maybe stop in for a beer. So anyway, we'll talk about it. But it's that, but that question is one that I have got probably much more frequently in the last 3 months.
Yeah. I feel like I can at least translate trade issues. I can translate, to the best of my ability, some agronomic stuff, the business side of things to farm. This is one where
is a tough one.
It's really tough. And hey, thanks a lot for sitting in on the technical briefing. I'm sure it was of the greatest level of interest.
So, okay, hang on. It was actually, really well done and the whole bit. But I will say I'm really appreciative of my early education in French immersion, because it's a technical briefing, there is no translation services. And so people ask questions in French, they get answered in French, and I can at least understand enough to know what's happening, but not enough that I could take good notes during that time.
This is why they don't send me to these things.
That is right, because you couldn't even say their last names. Anyway. Yeah, exactly. Couldn't even.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
Oh, I love the spam stuff.
Oh, good. The spam has started. We'll just delete those.
That's good.
From YouTube.
Hey, Linz, thanks so much for joining me here today on the Real Ag After Show. Great work on the technical briefing and the story. You can read more at realagriculture.com. Thanks a lot. Have yourself a great night. I'll let you go.
Cheers.
That was Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture. Great stuff. Great. I'm just as confused as everybody else is. So I don't want you to think that, what, am I missing something here? Like, how come I can't figure this out? I'm right there with you, trying to understand what the opportunity is for farmers when it comes to this carbon offset market. A couple news items that we covered on RealAg Radio that I'll hit quickly here before we wrap up at the top of the hour. We are going to see essentially the Minister of Agriculture for Ukraine present to the Canadian House Ag Committee on Agriculture tomorrow. Going to be talking about the global food security crisis and famine potentially because of Russia's war on Ukraine. So I know Real Agriculture is going to be there for that tomorrow, virtually, and we'll have a story up on that as well. We also saw the May Purdue CME sentiment index declined, a pretty significant decline. It's actually, the May reading is at 99. That's the weakest reading since April of 2020. The May 2022 barometer reading marked just the 9th time since data collection began in fall of 2015 that the overall measure of farmer sentiment fell below 100. Goes to show you that prices are high. That's one thing. There also is the balance sheets are telling you there's an opportunity for these markets to go higher, but the cost side, the uncertainty that is out there on those prices being able to sustain themselves, and the cost side's completely sneaking up, is really weighing on the farmer sentiment going forward, even though in most of these crops you can still pencil out a margin. There's just there's a negative sentiment out there over the longer term. Speaking of fertilizer prices, they have been cut significantly. Josh Linville appeared on AgriTalk. 3 things that he said he is watching right now. Russia's exports of fertilizer are now starting to find homes around the world. That is changing the supply equation. Brazil, one of those countries that's been taking a lot of Russian fertilizer, as they traditionally do. China also soon should announce whether or not it will export fertilizer products. Remember, they cut off products like phosphorus. They are 30% of the global supply of that product. And thirdly, if the Russia-Ukraine war ends, Europe could increase its natural gas production, which would reduce supply and decrease production costs for fertilizer manufacturers. The big question out there, like I said on RealAg Radio today, is when the heck should I buy my 23 fertilizer? Who the hell knows? I guess the question is, though, or the comment I would make to that is, because we've been asking this question, I asked Linville this at Commodity Classic, stay on top of it. Okay? Stay on top of it. We still are at pretty high levels, historically speaking, but this is not one you're going to want to pay attention to these markets when it comes to fertilizer, and maybe this is a year where you just don't buy it all at one time. Maybe there's it's incremental purchases. I don't know what the heck to tell you, but I know it's definitely weighing on you as you think ahead to the 23 crop. You heard me mention this issue about this beef labeling. Health Canada is proposing regulations which would require ground beef sold at retail to carry a high in saturated fat warning label. Ground beef, according to CCA, ground beef should be exempt from Health Canada's proposed front of package labeling like other nutritious foods such as single ingredient meat, milk, eggs, vegetables, and fruit. CCA is asking that the policy be equitable. This reminds me, so the idea is that the label is going to be like, hey, warning, maybe high in saturated fat. It's sort of like in Canada at the gas pump, like in the US it says like E10 and it's like a promotion tool. In Canada it says may contain 10% ethanol, like they're warning you. It's a deterrent to demand. And ground beef is a health and safe product that is produced in Canada, and it should be viewed that way. And Health Canada's push here potentially would be a countermeasure to that. Encourage you to go to realagriculture.com and listen to my interview with Dennis Laycraft on that. We are at just crazy fuel numbers. I filled up my Jeep yesterday, and a Jeep has like a very small tank. And I got a picture here I'm looking at where I'm actually going to put it on the screen for you. Okay, let's put it on the screen. There it is. I filled up my Jeep, and it was, make it bigger. This is me yesterday, okay? $136.75 to put in 70.5 liters of fuel, of gasoline. That is crazy town. Crazy town, I tell you. The costs and then diesel. So this was $1.93 a liter, which is essentially for everybody out there. Okay, when we're thinking about U.S. versus Canada prices, when I checked this, my understanding is that $2 a liter for gas is the same as $6 a gallon in the U.S. Okay. So the fuel costs in Canada, even though Americans have been complaining about it and their fuel prices are high too, ours are even higher. We're like California across the country. It really truly is got to a point of being ridiculous, and what we do about it, not sure. Of course, my mindset would be, we need to increase production. But there are others that see this as an opportunity to, see, I told you we shouldn't be using fossil fuels. We should be going 100% green energy. Where you fall on that, whatever. We can debate that as much as you want. So lots of stuff covered today on the show. Encourage you, if you did miss RealAg Radio on Rural Radio 147 today, encourage you to check out the podcast. You can get the RealAg Radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as you can listen to the stream at RealAgRadio.com. We'd love your thoughts on what we heard today on environmental cross-compliance. The federal government looking to put in the new Ag Stability program, looking to put in essentially strings attached to climate goals and what that could mean for the future of that programming. Farm groups quite upset. We heard from the GFO. We heard from Alberta Wheat on RealAg Radio, and I would love your thoughts on that as well. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in today to the RealAg Radio After Show. This is a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing this. Kind of keeps the momentum going off the show, and I really appreciate your participation as well. Tomorrow on RealAg Radio, we have the Farmer Rapid Fire. We'll talk to 4 farmers from across the country. We also have a webinar tomorrow on renewable diesel. Bob Day from Ceres Global Ag will be our guest. You can find out more by going to realagriculture.com/webinar to register. Hey, thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with the RealAg Radio After Show and everything we do here at Real Agriculture. And we'll chat again later.